As Arendt said, acting is fun. In an interview with the Jerusalem Post, a member of Public Movement declared, quote, "We're going to do some folk dancing, which, first of all, is really fun. And it creates some automatic solidarity between people. Just standing in a circle, holding hands, is the basic gesture of solidarity." One should not underestimate these moments of joy present in demonstrating in solidarity. Today's forms of radical democratic protest could hardly do without such joy, a joy that opposes the sad assumptions of a political reality without alternative. It is in the dancing of demonstrators that some of the jouissance of embodied democratic action expresses itself. But nevertheless, I would like to finish with a postscript on a different dimension or aspect of solidarity, a solidarity which I tend to describe as democratic solidarity, a solidarity which does not consist in closing a circle, in a solidarity among those who are already among themselves, the part of the same community, but a solidarity which precisely consists in alienating oneself from one's own identity in order to be in solidarity with somebody else. The classic example for me, and this is what I would call a democratic ethics, is the solidarity, the worldwide solidarity with the anti-apartheid struggle of the ANC in South Africa. So what makes this a form of solidarity? Certainly not because, you know, we are all, assuming that we were, in solidarity with the anti-apartheid struggle, we are all oppressed in the same way in which black South Africans were oppressed. Certainly not. It is a solidarity which rather consists in alienating oneself by being in solidarity with someone else. And in 2011, in September, when Mahmoud Abbas spoke to the UN Assembly in order to make his case for a Palestinian state, the same protesters staged a very similar event in solidarity with Abbas, because of course they are all on the Israeli left. So what they did was they now did not do an Israeli folk dance, they did a Palestinian folk dance, or rather a Lebanese folk dance, a dabke, which was then first, of course, exercise trained in public because nobody knew the movements, the choreography, the steps. And so what we have is, in the first place, I just show you while I'm talking. So what we have here, so what we see here is people taking a dancing lessons, basically. And the interesting thing is concerning this performance, which I bring as an example for what I would call democratic solidarity. The interesting thing is that the bodily knowledge, the tacit bodily knowledge of the state with which you grow up, which your body learns during in kindergarten and then for the rest of your life, this bodily knowledge can also be unlearned. So I think that by learning some, steps which you do not necessarily know already, you at the same time, in this case, unlearn your own national body language, if you wish. And so what we have here is, again, a different circle dance. First trained in public, and then performed again on the crossroads in Israel, and in this case in Tel Aviv. And I would like just to stop and end my talk with this example of another circle dance.
Before opening the floor for questions, I have a question actually. Is it manageable with the lights?
No, but...
No? Is it possible to...
No problem.
Yeah? Okay. Well, my question is the following. Oops. Let's fix this. Yeah. My question goes to one of the political criteria that you mentioned that make something political. And I guess the ultimate goal of the question has to do with the issue of the effect of protest in public space when it comes to the political aspect of it. And now my question is the following, and it touches upon two cases, both the case of Athens that you showed the clips at the beginning, which were the protests on Syntagma Square at the same time that in the parliament they were voting for all the measurements that the EMF had asked, etc. And it also goes to the case of Israel. Now you mentioned that one of the political criteria that makes something political is conflict, is that a public space emerges when things get stuck, and also that public order needs to be disturbed, right? And I'm wondering, in both of these cases, what is the public order that we are talking about? For instance, if I think, and this is something that I'm trying to figure out myself, if I think about the case of Greece, since 2008, it seems that there is actually, the order is comprised out of all sorts of different events and disruptions. And for example, if this morning you want to come to the University Theatre, you would go to the website that gives you the instructions to come here, 9292ove.nl. It tells you which tram to take. If you are in Athens and you want to go somewhere, you go to the website, which is, if I remember correctly, aperia.gr. It means strike.gr, and you find out which are the strikes of the day. So what is on strike and what is not on strike, where there are crowds on the street and where there are not crowds on the street, in order to get there. And this, it seems to, it's supposed to be the exception, but in fact it is the rule. And if I think also about Israel, then it is a country in war. So there is a daily life, there is a daily routine. If somebody tells you that one is traveling to Israel for holidays, one goes swimming and having fun, but in fact it's a country in war. So I'm wondering, in what respect can one actually, in a sense, consider that there is an existence of a public order, some kind of normality, that events like this are disturbing, or they are the exception, or that they break it? Or should we probably think a little bit, is it possible to probably reverse the terms of what is the rule and what is the exception, what is order and what is a break of it?
Yeah, well, thank you. I do not have a notion of the order. Maybe maybe this is not a misunderstanding, but I didn't make myself clear enough or didn't spell it out. I do not think that there is such thing as the state, as some claim, or the public order, or something like this. But of course, there are routines, otherwise there would no social life be possible. And there are functionalities of particular procedures of the economy, of politics, of traffic, or whatever. And all this is full of holes, and of course nothing of this really works to 100%, and it breaks down all the time. I mean, just try to take a train in Germany. I don't know about the Netherlands, but and you realize things break down, quite regularly. So there is not such thing as the order, but what a political event produces at the end of the day is, to a certain degree, the breakdown of these functions and these procedures. However, I do not claim that this political event has to happen on a grand scale. It's not that the whole nation, the whole life of the nation has to stop because, a revolutionary event breaks out. The most minimal events and the most minimal actions can temporarily sort of, put a hole in the order, and sort of create disturbances and thereby open a political or public space where things get possible which were not before. So I rather would tend to speak about minimal politics, where, for instance, only 3 or 4 people just met to act collectively, to assemble, to block a blogosphere of circulation, and also to construct a conflict, or sort of enact a conflict. So I don't have a grandiose idea of politics, actually, and therefore I don't have a grandiose idea of order.
Yeah, I see a question over there. Actually, do we need a mic? This is a question to the technician. Is a microphone necessary?
I don't know, I think that's fine.
I think it's not, yeah.
I have a question about the role of the choreography, and I maybe start with the Google example. It seems that the choreography, like reenacting the violence through choreography, puts the focus very clearly on representation and the body at the intersection of the self and representation, which, a gay parade is in a way anyway, because you're not just walking there because you're gay there or represent being gay. And you didn't show the double channel video, but I'm assuming that there might be kind of a strange assimilation of the hopping right-wing guys, right? And the choreography, which makes it in a way disruptive, maybe silly. And the dances, the ring dances are also, they're horribly silly, right? I just came back from Athens, actually, I was there last week. We talked a lot to people who organize protests, and I think a way to comment on the political situation is exactly by not just walking around with the banner, but by doing something that is more artistic. And I'm asking you to elaborate on it because I was then surprised that I really liked the talk, but I was surprised that you made the distinction, I think, twice between artistic and political protest. You said, oh, this is now not artistic anymore, this is political. For me, the point seemed to be exactly the power of the subversive alienation, or whatever you want to call it, through the artistic. Is that a clear question? It's kind of a comment. So I was surprised that you would make this distinction, right? Saying, oh, this is not a political protest.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, yeah. May I just ask?
Yes,
the first dimension you mentioned was the question of representation. I would say it's more about representation. Also, in the case of Pride parades, it is about creating visibility and like taking not only the space but also taking visibility. So it is in itself very performative. It's not just representing ourselves. And the second thing is that of course there are different notions of politics, and of course you can, if you have a different notion of politics, a different artistic practices might very well be described as political. What I wanted to do is simply to sort of define a particular notion of politics, which would be public protest events, and call that politics. Of course, I'm very well aware that there are other forms of politics, and starting with the parliament and going to micro-political aspects of, the private is political, the personal is political, and so on. I'm very well aware of this, and it's perfectly legitimate to have other conceptions of politics. What I wanted to do is just to define politics, the politics of street protest. And in that sense, I was saying, this then is not political,
Is there not? Yeah, I see.
I was just going to give another example of a round dance similar to this the Israeli one. The Canadian indigenous protest movement, the Idle No More movement, used a very similar protest tactic for 2 months in December and last January in support of a hunger strike. And it had the additional function of not only beginning as an indigenous-led protest, but it was an opportunity to open the circle in the active participation, but also for non-indigenous people to show their support for the movement itself. And it went on for months and will probably continue, but almost virtually the exact same, but it comes from a different tradition.
Yeah. Well, very I'm very grateful for that comment.
Yeah.
Mentioning Native American Indians in 1890, there was around more than 2,000 people killed at the Wounded Knee, and they were ghost dancers. They were dancing in circles. Basically, when the American Indian movement was scattered completely, and the Indians didn't know what to do anymore, the shaman called Boboka showed up with a ghost dance, and he said that he talked with the god of white people, and there shouldn't be another bullet shot from the gun of the Indians towards the white people, and they should just start dancing. And all the tribes, all the Indians, young people, old people, everyone started dancing. So American soldiers got a bit nervous about it, and it all escalated in this event on 29 December in 1890. And I'm coming from Serbia, from Belgrade. I'm an artist myself, and I was involved in a lot of protests in the 90s against the government. And the thing that I didn't like about the protest was that basically we were afraid about everything. We were like, I was 16 when the war started, and like coming out on the street and gathering in a big group would give us a feeling that there is more of us, where it's not about me, it's 10,000 people, 20,000 people getting on the street. Us dancing on the street was, we don't care about police and guns and whatever. We just want to live our lives and be happy. And it was some kind of a feeling of being too courageous to dance. But what I didn't like was that every time some event would happen, there would be politicians that would claim, that would build their political image. They would become strong politicians, leaders, you know, like someone would take all this energy that was created. And I found this example with the Native American Indians as very interesting because it was not connected to politics, but they danced in a different, from a different perspective.
Thank you. Is there another question or comment? Yes?
Yeah, I was wondering now some people dropped in some other examples. I was thinking if you call this a political event, this round dances, and also it becomes political when it's done like more times, when there's this repetition. We also see something as the Harlem Shake as a political event. The Harlem Shake as a political event, is that then also a political event? I mean, it has this blockade somewhere in the city. It has some elements of it.
Well, you see, I don't think that flash mobs in general are political, you know, because therefore I need more than one criteria. Just to say the interruption, you know, of public order for a certain amount of time is political is not enough. You know, there have to be a real conflict there. You know, where it is clear that at the end of the day, it is clear that these dances in Israel, for instance, are part of a larger social movement and of a political context. It's not just for fun.
But then the second question, isn't then these round dances, don't they have isn't there the risk that they become these flash mobs as well?
Yeah, of course. It is a risk that they again degenerate into a non-political performance. Yeah, absolutely.
But I think it's, sorry to interrupt, but I think it's rather going into a direction where they could be misunderstood to begin with. You know, an immediate reaction to an action makes sense because the people are still in close memory to what happened at the actual event. And if it's getting forgotten and all of a sudden people are dancing in the streets in Israel at a crossroad and nobody remembers what actually happened before, and especially if it's a Lebanese dance and people think more about the Palestinians, then the reaction, a new reaction will be formed to an action which might not be the right one in order to understand that it's an actual political protest.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, that what happened in the first place, that I saw a restaging of the circle dance, Otla in Jerusalem last summer. And of course, I mean, it was at the biggest crossroad in Jerusalem, and it was very impressive, and cars stopped and so on. But there was no politics involved there. Of course, it was not for, I assume, for nobody would connect it with the social protests the year before. So, I mean, that's perfectly possible. Yeah.
Is there any last comment or question? We have time for one more. Just about. Yes.
Wondering a bit,
okay.
how do you see about the monument as political? Because you were talking about the reenactment of the dancing as a temporary monument.
Temporary monument,
yeah.
yes.
So I wonder what the monument.
This is not my own term. It is a term by a commentator on the Grubic piece from. I think he wrote something for the Belgrade Museum of Art, and he speaks about a temporary monument, and monument meaning that it is basically a memorial. I guess you know what he means, a memorial to the to these protests and the violence on the streets and the victims of it. And it is temporary for obvious reasons, because they just dance and then they leave. So it's quite. Yeah, whether it's a good term, I don't know. Actually, I personally would not necessarily call it a monument.
Oh, more questions for that. Yeah, one is here, and then we can go to the next one. Yeah. Yes, please. Yeah.
This is just a comment on the monument term. There is an American art historian called Kirk Savage who has written about that, questioning the traditional monument and discussing other versions of monuments involving, for instance, dances of that. So I just wanted to add that to the discussion.
And just before there was.
Oh, sorry, I wonder whether you could tell a little bit more, or give a little bit more context, if there's time left, about the theoretical stakes of what you were saying about when the movement, or when artistic event becomes political. In the beginning you were talking about sort of like opposition you are having or developing against some notions of politics which remain very much in the singular individual. And I was just thinking maybe you could take the time to tell a little bit more about what the struggle there at the theoretical level.
Oh, there are huge theoretical implications. Well, this is nearly the last question. Everyone wants to leave. I mean, yes, the antagonism, the notion of antagonism, which was, of course, it goes back to the Hegelian tradition, to Kant, and then to Marx, and to and was then taken up by Laclau and Mouffe, has very wide theoretical implications, and I tend to sort of stretch the term to the extreme. I think that it's the same with social movements. Some people talk about, some sociologists talk about the movement society. We are living in a movement society because whenever we turn off television, whatever, we are confronted with protest, with social movements. But I even think, I was addressing this shortly, I think the term movement has even an ontological implication, because it has this notion of motus, of emet, of this idea of a constant, of society or the social being constantly in movement, constantly moving, and being driven by social conflict, that is, by antagonism, not necessarily conflict in the street protest sense of the term, but by antagonisms which crisscross the whole field of the social and which are performed and reenacted all the time whenever we, enact our, identity as male, as female, whatever, our national identity, we enact, in certain senses antagonism which remains latent but can become manifest and thereby become public at any time whenever, antagonism sort of breaks out on a larger scale and becomes collectivizable. And in that sense, it has the, maximal theoretical implications you can get, because you end up with a social ontology, which might also change the way you perceive social rituals. So it has also other implications, political implications, theoretical implications, because it changes your perspective on how you look at seemingly peaceful social affairs.
And Thijs eventually does have a question.
Yeah, no, just a similar theoretical complication perhaps. I was thinking about the Harlem Shake comparison. You were drawing a little bit on Hannah Arendt's distinctions of the three realms of human experience, intellect, work, acting. You could say that dancing it's the most virtuosic thing to do. I mean, it's inherently virtuosic. But can't you say that that Arendt's distinction of what is a public sort of seems to have to collapse upon itself? I don't necessarily see a big difference anymore between work, intellect, and acting today. I mean, precisely because there is such a big correlation between what the Harlem Shake or flash mobs and these types of virtuosic acting. It's precisely because these Arendtian distinctions between human experience have sort of, merged, combined. They have all become together receiving a public function. I mean, people at work are encouraged to do, similar virtuosic things today. So I was wondering whether that model of shaping a public through acting, through Hannah Arendt particularly, is useful to what we see.
Yeah. I mean, I get your point. I think it is simply a question of the theoretical instruments you apply and the theories you apply. If you have a post-operaist notion, like Paolo Viano's notion of virtuosity, then of course these distinctions may collapse to a certain degree. I mean, maybe it's old-fashioned, but I would try to keep distinctions, some distinctions at least, between the politics of politics and the politics of the everyday, of micro-political implications of virtuosity in the workplace and so on and so forth. It's not that I deny that they exist, of course. It's perfectly correct what you said, but I would want to keep and cling to a notion of politics in the way I presented it in order to be able to make distinctions, which is again very Arendtian, because Arendt also says, thinking is about making distinctions.
Thank you very much. I would like to invite everyone to continue the discussion during the break over coffee. And yeah, thank you very much, Oliver.